The Crucible Arena had been operational for approximately 743 standard galactic years, which meant it had been killing people for profit, since before Earth had figured out gunpowder was better used in weapons than in elaborate fireworks displays. Located in the tertiary spiral of the Andromeda-adjacent sector, the arena served as the galaxy's premier destination for anyone who wanted to watch sentient beings fight for their lives against creatures that evolution had specifically designed to end those lives in creative and messy ways. It was, by all accounts, extraordinarily popular entertainment. The betting pool for round 1 on this particular rotation cycle had swollen to approximately 47 million credits, which was unusual but not unprecedented. What was unprecedented was that roughly 98% of those credits were bet on a single outcome. The human contestant wouldn't survive the first 3 minutes. The remaining 2% was split between optimistic fools who thought she might make it to 4 minutes, and one particularly drunk Zelthorian who had apparently bet his entire cargo ship that she'd last the full 10 minutes required to advance. His friends were already planning his bankruptcy party. In the luxury observation boxes that ringed the upper levels of the arena, beings from 200 different species lounged in climate-controlled comfort, sipping beverages that ranged from fermented plant matter to liquefied minerals, all united in their certainty that they were about to witness a very short and probably hilarious spectacle. Humans, after all, were the punchline to approximately 60% of all jokes told in this quadrant of space. They came from a world they'd nicknamed Earth, with all the creativity of a species that had also named their only moon, Moon, and their sun, Sun. They had no natural armor, no venom sacs, no razor-sharp anything, and their reaction time was slower than a gastropod senator during budget allocation meetings. The arena master himself, a towering Korthax named Velcrim, whose species had evolved specifically to intimidate through sheer size and an excessive number of horns, stood in his private booth reviewing the contestant roster with something approaching glee. He was 3 meters tall, covered in scales that could deflect small arms fire, and possessed a voice that could literally shake the foundations of the arena when he wanted it to. Right now, he was chuckling, which sounded like rocks being ground together in a cement mixer. A human. He rumbled to his assistant, a nervous Plixian whose entire body was basically a collection of tentacles arranged in a vaguely bipedal shape. They actually sent us a human for round 1. Do you know how long it's been since we've had a human contestant? The assistant consulted his datapad, his tentacles flickering across the surface with practiced efficiency. 47 years, Master. The last one lasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds before the Vex Thor stalker eviscerated him. The betting pool was significantly smaller that year, but the crowd considered it highly entertaining. 4 minutes? Velcrim mused, his mandibles clicking together in amusement. This one won't make 3. Look at her file. She's a freight hauler, a cargo pusher. She got into this because she got into a drinking contest with a Margalian smuggler and lost badly enough that she couldn't pay her tab. The bar owner sold her contract to us for 800 credits. 800? I've paid more for a decent meal. Down in the holding cells beneath the arena, Raina Kowalski was very much aware that she'd made what could generously be called a series of poor life decisions. The cell wasn't uncomfortable exactly. It was climate-controlled, relatively clean, and the bunk wasn't worse than what she'd slept on aboard her cargo hauler for the past 6 years. But it was definitely a cell, complete with energy barriers and guards who looked at her the way someone might look at a particularly incompetent insect that had wandered into their path. The guard currently on duty was a Threxian, which meant he was basically a 2-meter-tall praying mantis with an attitude problem and hands that could quite literally cut through hull plating. He'd been staring at her for the better part of an hour with the kind of expression that suggested he was trying to figure out if she was some kind of elaborate joke. "You know," Raina said conversationally, sitting cross-legged on her bunk and eating what the arena had optimistically labeled as a nutritional supplement bar, but which tasted like compressed cardboard mixed with regret. "The staring thing is getting a little weird. I know I'm exotic and everything, but maybe you could try being subtle about it." The Threxian's mandibles clicked in what might have been confusion or irritation. With Threxians, it was hard to tell. "I am simply attempting to understand why a human would volunteer for the Crucible arena. Your species has a documented survival instinct. Poor by galactic standards, but present." "Volunteer is a strong word," Raina replied, taking another bite of her terrible bar. "Let's say I was voluntold. And before you ask, yes, I know the statistics. No human has ever made it past round 1. We're soft, we're slow, we're basically mobile protein packages wrapped in skin that tears if you look at it wrong. I've heard the speech several times, from several guards. You guys really need some new material. And yet, you seem unconcerned." "Oh, I'm concerned," Raina said cheerfully. "I'm absolutely terrified. But see, here's the thing about humans that your fancy databases probably don't mention because it's not quantifiable in any meaningful way. We're spite-driven. We run on pure, distilled stubbornness. We're the species that looked at natural selection and said, you know what? Screw that. And then invented tools. We turned wolves into chihuahuas just because we could. We put robots on Mars before we figured out sustainable energy. We're really, really bad at knowing when to quit." The Threxian stared at her for another long moment, then made a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been him choking on his own confusion. "You are about to face a Vex-Thor stalker. It has 4-centimeter claws, armor plating that can withstand plasma fire, and reflexes approximately 4 times faster than yours. Your spite will not save you." "Maybe not," Raina agreed, finishing her bar and crumpling the wrapper. "But it'll make for one hell of a show. And isn't that what you people are paying for?" In the adjacent cells, other Round 1 contestants were preparing in their own ways. There was a Margalian warrior, all 7 feet of muscle and crystalline bone protrusions, who was performing elaborate stretching exercises that looked like they might actually be some form of interpretive dance. 2 cells down, a Quelix was doing breathing exercises that filled its cell with bioluminescent gas, which was apparently calming for its species, but looked like someone had trapped a rave in a box. A Dravok was sharpening the natural blades that extended from its forearms, creating a sound like knives on whetstones that made everyone else's teeth hurt. They all, without exception, ignored the human. 30 minutes before the event was scheduled to begin, Velkrim descended to the arena floor to give his traditional pre-fight address. This was mostly ceremonial, a bit of theater designed to get the crowd properly excited and to remind the contestants exactly how much danger they were in, as if the massive predator pens visible through reinforced viewing ports weren't enough of a hint. The arena floor itself was a circular space approximately 150 meters in diameter, with a sand-covered surface that was easier to clean blood off of than solid flooring. The walls rose up 20 meters before the first tier of spectator seating began, and they were smooth enough that climbing them was functionally impossible, which several past contestants had learned the hard way. Scattered across the arena floor were various obstacles: artificial rock formations, metal barriers, pieces of what might have once been buildings or ships, all carefully placed to provide interesting terrain for the fights, without actually giving contestants anywhere to hide effectively. The 11 Round 1 contestants stood in a line at the center of the arena. And Raina had to admit that standing next to most of them made her feel like someone had accidentally brought a house cat to a tiger convention. She was 5'7", which was average for a human woman, but put her as the shortest contestant by at least a foot. She was wearing the standard arena jumpsuit, which was apparently designed to be easily removed from corpses, based on how little protection it offered. Her only advantages were a pair of reasonably good boots, the fact that she was in decent shape from years of manual cargo handling, and a lifetime of experience dealing with things that wanted to kill her, which on Earth mostly meant Australian wildlife and capitalism. Velkrim's voice boomed across the arena, amplified through speakers and translator devices that ensured everyone present could understand his words in their native language or closest equivalent. Welcome, contestants, to round 1 of the Crucible Arena. You have been selected, either through valor, desperation, or in some cases, profound stupidity, to prove your worth in combat against the galaxy's most efficient predators. The crowd roared. Raina noticed that the volume increased noticeably when Velkrim gestured in her direction. Great. She was the comedy act. The rules are simple, Velkrim continued, pacing in front of the line of contestants like a professor giving a lecture on applied violence. You will face 3 predators, released at intervals over the course of 10 minutes. These predators have been selected specifically for round 1 as entry-level challenges. They can kill you, certainly, but they will not do so instantly unless you make truly catastrophic decisions. Your goal is to survive for the full 10 minutes. If you can additionally eliminate the predators, the crowd will be pleased. But survival is sufficient for advancement. He stopped directly in front of Raina, and she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. This close, she could see that his scales had some kind of iridescent quality that made them shimmer under the arena lights. It was actually kind of pretty, in the way that poisonous frogs were pretty. Historical data suggests that humans do not survive round 1, Velkrim said, his voice carrying across the arena despite being directed at her. The longest any human has lasted is 4 minutes and 17 seconds. I would suggest you make your peace with whatever deities your species has invented. You have approximately 3 minutes to do so. Raina smiled up at him, the expression entirely too calm for someone who'd just been told their life expectancy was measured in minutes. You know what the problem with historical data is? It's historical. Someone's got to be the first to break the trend. Might as well be me. Velkrim's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. I admire your optimism, little human. The crowd will enjoy watching it die. He turned to address all the contestants. Return to your starting positions. The arena will begin in 2 minutes. The contestants dispersed to their designated zones, marked positions around the arena perimeter that gave each of them roughly equal distance from the center. Raina's position was directly opposite the main predator gate, which she suspected was not a coincidence. They wanted good camera angles of her being torn apart. How thoughtful. The 2 minutes passed with a kind of agonizing slowness that only occurs when you're waiting for something terrible to happen. Raina used the time productively, scanning the arena for anything useful. The metal barriers were too heavy to lift, but some of the rock formations had loose pieces. There was debris scattered around that might serve as improvised weapons if she got desperate enough. The sand itself was deep enough to potentially affect movement, which would slow down the predators but would also slow down anyone trying to run. The smart play would be to stay mobile, use the obstacles for cover, and try not to die. She'd worked with worse plans. The crowd's noise reached a fever pitch as the countdown began, numbers projected in holographic displays around the arena that were visible from every angle. 10, 9, 8. Raina rolled her shoulders, shook out her arms, and reminded herself that spite had gotten humanity through ice ages, world wars, and the invention of social media. She could handle one overgrown lizard. 3, 2, 1. The buzzer sounded like the universe clearing its throat before announcing bad news. The main predator gate split open with a hiss of hydraulics, and the first contestant emerged from the darkness beyond with the kind of confidence that came from never having met anything it couldn't eat. The Vexthor stalker was approximately 3 meters long from nose to tail, built along the same general lines as a Komodo dragon that had been hitting the gym and taking steroids. Its scales were a mottled gray and black that would have provided excellent camouflage in its natural environment. Though, in the bright lights of the arena, it just made it look like animated rock. The claws the guard had mentioned were very much present and accounted for, gleaming as it flexed its feet against the sand. Its head was wedge-shaped and covered in additional armor plating, with eyes that tracked movement with the kind of focus that suggested its brain had exactly 2 settings: hunt and eat. It paused just outside the gate, head swiveling as it scanned the arena for targets. Its gaze passed over the various contestants, lingering briefly on the larger species before settling on Raina with what she could have sworn was interest. Of course, the universe had a sense of humor, and that sense of humor apparently thought it would be hilarious to have the predator target the human first. The Vexthor stalker moved. For something its size, it was obscenely fast. It crossed half the arena in what felt like seconds, sand spraying behind it, moving with the kind of fluid grace that came from millions of years of evolution optimizing for murder. The crowd went absolutely insane, the noise level jumping to somewhere between rock concert and natural disaster. Raina did not, as the crowd probably expected, freeze in terror or attempt to run in a straight line like Prey in every nature documentary ever made. Instead, she did something that surprised both the predator and most of the audience. She ran directly at it. The Vexthor's eyes widened fractionally in what might have been confusion. This was not standard prey behavior. Prey ran away. Prey tried to hide. Prey did not charge at predators while screaming what was probably some kind of battle cry, though the translator was having trouble with the specific profanity involved. At the last possible second, when the Vexthor opened its jaws to receive its apparently suicidal meal, Raina dropped into a slide that would have made any baseball coach proud, using the sand to her advantage as she slid directly under the predator's snapping jaws. As she passed beneath it, she reached up and grabbed onto the softer scales on its belly, using her momentum to swing herself up onto its back while it was still processing the fact that its lunch had just slid between its legs. The Vexthor did not appreciate having a human suddenly mounted on its spine. It thrashed, trying to throw her off. But Raina had 6 years of experience maintaining her grip on cargo containers in 0G, and she was not about to be dislodged by an overgrown iguana having a tantrum. She wrapped her legs around its midsection, grabbed onto the ridge of armor plating behind its head, and held on while it bucked and spun like a rodeo bull on amphetamines. "This is going well," Raina shouted at no one in particular, though her words were picked up by the arena's audio systems and broadcast to the stunned crowd. "Anyone got a saddle?" The Margalian warrior, who had been preparing to engage the predator in what he'd assumed would be honorable combat, just stared. The Quelix stopped its breathing exercises. Even Velkrim, watching from his booth, leaned forward with an expression that suggested he was recalculating several assumptions about human psychology. The Vexthor, realizing that thrashing wasn't working, changed tactics. It ran directly at one of the metal barriers, clearly intending to crush the annoying parasite on its back against solid steel. Reyna saw this coming because she wasn't an idiot, and also because the predator's body language was about as subtle as a freight train. At the last second, she released her grip and pushed off, launching herself away from the predator's back while it slammed headfirst into the barrier with enough force to create a sound like someone dropping a car from a significant height. Reyna hit the sand in a roll, came up running, and immediately grabbed a loose rock about the size of her fist from one of the artificial formations. The Vex Thor shook its head, clearly dazed but far from done, and turned back toward her with an expression that suggested this had now become personal. "Round 2, Reyna muttered, weighing the rock in her hand. "Let's see if you've got a concussion protocol." The predator charged again, this time not bothering with any pretense of stalking or strategy. It just wanted the small, annoying thing dead as quickly as possible. Reyna waited, rock held ready, watching its approach. She'd worked dock loading for years, which meant she had pretty good aim when it came to throwing things at specific targets. Usually those targets were receptacle bins for cargo crates, but the principle was the same. At optimal range, she threw the rock with every bit of strength she had, aiming not for the heavily armored head, but for the predator's left eye. The rock flew true, struck home with a wet impact that made the front rows of the audience flinch, and the Vex Thor's charge turned into a tumble as it reflexively jerked its head away from the sudden pain, lost its balance, and plowed into the sand in a confusion of limbs and tail. Reyna didn't wait to see if it would get up. She grabbed a larger rock, ran to where the predator was thrashing and trying to regain its feet, and brought the rock down on the back of its head with enough force that she felt the impact travel up her arms. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th impact, the Vex Thor stopped moving. The arena went completely silent for approximately 3 seconds, which was the amount of time it took for several thousand beings to collectively process what they'd just witnessed. Then the noise that erupted was less like cheering and more like a sonic weapon going off. Reyna stood over the dead predator, breathing hard, her jumpsuit covered in sand, and what she really hoped was just sand, and looked directly at the nearest camera drone. 1 down. What's next? In the betting boxes, approximately 98% of the wagered credits had just evaporated like water on a hot plate. The Zelthorian who'd bet on the human surviving was suddenly looking significantly more sober and was being mobbed by friends who couldn't decide whether to congratulate him or check him for telepathic abilities. Velkrim's expression had progressed from amused to annoyed. This was not how round 1 was supposed to go. Humans died in round 1. That was the natural order of things. They certainly didn't mount predators and then beat them to death with rocks like some kind of prehistoric psychopath. "Release the second predator," he ordered into his comm system. Immediately. The second predator gate opened, and what emerged was significantly worse than one angry lizard. The Skrael's swarm was technically a single organism that had evolved into a collective intelligence composed of approximately 200 individual units, each about the size of a human fist, each equipped with sharp mandibles and a profound enthusiasm for consuming flesh. They moved across the arena floor like a living carpet, flowing around obstacles with the kind of coordination that suggested they were all operating off the same angry brain. The other contestants immediately recognized the threat and began moving toward higher ground or creating defensive positions. The Margalian warrior extended his bone protrusions and prepared to skewer as many individual Skrael as possible. The Dravok activated some kind of energy field that created a barrier around itself. Smart plays, all of them. Reyna looked at the approaching swarm, looked at the dead Vex Thor, looked at the metal barriers, and had an idea that was either brilliant or suicidal. The line between those 2 options was always thinner than people like to admit. She grabbed the Vex Thor by its tail, which took all of her strength and involved a lot of swearing, and began dragging it toward the nearest metal barrier. The creature probably weighed twice what she did, and pulling it through sand was like trying to drag a boulder through mud. But humans had not gotten to the top of Earth's food chain by giving up when things were difficult. They'd gotten there by being too stubborn to die and too creative to quit. The Skrael's swarm noticed her movement and shifted direction, flowing toward her with horrifying speed. She had maybe 30 seconds before they reached her position, which was not a lot of time, but was enough time if she didn't waste it panicking. She positioned the dead Vex Thor against the metal barrier, climbed up onto the barrier itself, and then began kicking pieces of loose metal from the barrier's damaged section where the Vex Thor had slammed into it. The metal shrieked in protest, but several pieces came loose, including one long shard that was roughly the shape of a spear if you were generous with your definition of spear. The Skrael swarm reached the dead predator and immediately began consuming it. Because why chase down live prey when there was fresh meat right there? This bought Reyna approximately 15 more seconds, which she used to position herself on top of the barrier with her improvised spear. Waiting. The thing about swarm creatures is that they're excellent at overwhelming single targets through sheer numbers, but they're not great at tactical thinking. When the first wave of Skrael finished with the easily accessible parts of the dead predator and began climbing up the barrier toward Reyna, they did so in a nice, convenient line that allowed her to spear them individually as they came within range. It was not elegant. It was not clean. It involved a lot of stabbing, some creative swearing in 3 languages, and at one point using her boot to kick a cluster of Skrael back into their companions, with enough force to create a brief Skrael traffic jam. But it worked. The swarm, realizing that climbing the barrier was resulting in unacceptable casualties, tried to regroup and find another approach. This gave Reyna time to notice that the barrier she was standing on was positioned near one of the arena's environmental control panels, probably used for arena maintenance or special effects. The panel was protected by a cover that was clearly never meant to be opened by contestants. But Reyna had 6 years of experience breaking into secured cargo containers, and this lock was significantly less sophisticated. She jimmied the panel open, looked at the controls inside, found what she was looking for, and pressed the button labeled with a symbol she really hoped meant what she thought it meant. The arena's fire suppression system activated. High-pressure jets of flame-retardant foam erupted from nozzles positioned around the arena perimeter, designed to quickly blanket fires that might break out during particularly enthusiastic battles. The foam was freezing cold, extremely dense, and absolutely not compatible with the Skrael swarm's biology. The individual units began convulsing as the foam covered them, their collective coordination breaking down as the cold affected their nervous systems. Within 90 seconds, the Skrael swarm was no longer a threat. It was now approximately 200 very cold, very confused, very dead, fist-sized bugs embedded in rapidly hardening foam. The other contestants stared at the foam-covered arena floor. Then they stared at Reyna, who was sitting on top of the metal barrier looking entirely too pleased with herself. Then they looked at each other, with expressions that suggested they were all simultaneously realizing that perhaps they had underestimated the human. Reyna checked the arena's main timer display. 6 minutes, 40 seconds elapsed. 3 minutes and 20 seconds until the round ended. One more predator to go. "Anytime you're ready," she called out to Velkrim's booth. "I've got places to be." In his booth, Velkrim was no longer amused. He was now actively angry, which for a Korthax meant his scales were darkening to almost black, and his horns were practically vibrating with rage. No one made a fool of the arena master in his own arena. No one. "Release the round 2 predator," he ordered. His assistant's tentacles froze. "Master, the rules specify round 1 predators only. The round 2 predator is..." I am aware of the rules, Velkrim interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. I am also aware that this human has made a mockery of my arena. Release the Predator. The third Predator gate opened, and what emerged made several of the other contestants immediately head for the arena perimeter in the hope of climbing the walls or discovering a sudden ability to teleport. The Krathax Apex Predator was 4 meters of armor-plated nightmare, built along the lines of a bear that had been crossed with a tank and then given anger management issues. It had 6 legs, each ending in claws that could tear through hull plating, a head that was mostly jaw, and hide thick enough that small arms fire just annoyed it. It was called an Apex Predator because there was literally nothing in its natural environment that could challenge it, including natural disasters and geological events. It was also, according to arena regulations, supposed to be reserved for round 2. After contestants had been whittled down to those who actually knew what they were doing, the Krathax took one look around the arena, spotted the various contestants, and did the Predator equivalent of a smile. Then it moved. The Margalian warrior lasted approximately 12 seconds before he was forced to trigger his emergency evacuation beacon, which teleported him out of the arena in a flash of light. This was technically allowed, but meant automatic disqualification. The Quelix discovered that bioluminescent gas was not an effective deterrent against something that hunted by vibration and smell, and also evacuated. Within 30 seconds, the only contestants remaining in the arena were Reyna, the Dravok behind its energy shield, and 3 others who were doing excellent impressions of statues in the hope that staying very, very still would prevent them from being noticed. The Krathax, having scared away the easy targets, turned its attention to the small, foam-covered human standing on a metal barrier and holding a makeshift spear. Reyna looked at the Predator, looked at her spear, looked at the timer, which showed 1 minute and 45 seconds remaining, looked back at the Predator. Okay, she said quietly. This might be a problem. The Krathax charged. Reyna did the only thing she could think of. She ran, not away from the Predator, because that would be suicide, but parallel to its charge, using the metal barriers and rock formations as obstacles to break line of sight. The Krathax was fast for its size, but not particularly agile, and its momentum carried it past her position as she dove behind a rock formation, rolled, came up running in a different direction. The Predator corrected course, smashed through the rock formation like it was made of cardboard, and continued pursuit. Reyna kept moving, kept the obstacles between her and the Predator, kept checking the timer. 1 minute, 20 seconds. 1 minute. 45 seconds. The Krathax was getting frustrated. Frustrated Predators made mistakes. Reyna waited for it. The mistake came when the Krathax, annoyed at constantly losing visual contact with its prey, attempted to smash through one of the larger metal barriers rather than going around it. Its claws hit the metal, punched through, and then stuck for approximately 2 seconds as it tried to extract them. 2 seconds was all Reyna needed. She ran directly at the stuck Predator, used a rock formation as a springboard to jump higher than should have been possible, and brought her metal spear down directly into the Krathax's left eye, with every bit of strength, momentum, and spite she could channel into the strike. The spear punched through the eye, through the socket, and into whatever passed for the Krathax's brain. The Predator made a sound like a garbage truck dying, thrashed once, twice, and then collapsed into the sand with enough force to create a small crater. The buzzer sounded. 10 minutes elapsed. Round 1 complete. Reyna stood on top of the dead Krathax, covered in foam, sand, blood, and various fluids she didn't want to identify, still holding the spear. breathing like she'd just run a marathon while being chased by everything terrible in the universe. The arena was completely silent. Then someone in the crowd started slow clapping. Another joined in. Within seconds, the entire arena was on its feet, the noise level reaching somewhere past deafening and approaching weaponized. This wasn't just cheering. This was the sound of several thousand beings simultaneously realizing they'd just witnessed something that should not have been possible. In the betting boxes, the one drunk Zelthorian was being carried around on his friend's shoulders like a conquering hero. His cargo ship was safe. His stupidity had accidentally been genius. Velcrim stood in his booth, staring at the human standing on top of a round 2 predator she'd just killed with a piece of scrap metal and what appeared to be pure spite. His assistant was very carefully not saying anything because the arena master's expression suggested that words might result in violence. "Get medical down there," Velcrim finally said, his voice carefully neutral. "Run the standard post-round examination, and then assign her quarters in the winner's wing. She's advanced to round 2. "But master, she violated nothing," Velcrim interrupted. "I released that predator. I broke protocol, not her. The crowd witnessed it. If I disqualify her now, I look like a cheat and a fool." She advances. Down in the arena, medical drones were descending to check on the surviving contestants. Reyna climbed down from her perch on the dead Krathax, accepted a thermal blanket from a medical technician who couldn't seem to decide if they should be impressed or terrified, and walked toward the exit gate on legs that were starting to remember how much they'd just been through. As she passed the camera drones, she paused, looked directly into the lens and said, "Round 2 next week, right? Someone tell the arena master I'll need that schedule. I've got some training to do." The arena erupted again. In quarters across the galaxy, on ships and stations and planets spanning hundreds of star systems, humans watched the broadcast and had a collective realization. Every human who'd ever been told they were too weak, too slow, too soft, too limited by their biology to compete with species that had claws and armor and venom and natural weapons saw Reyna Kowalski standing over 3 dead predators covered in foam and spite and thought the same thing. Maybe the galaxy had underestimated humans. Maybe it was time to correct that assumption. By the time Reyna reached her new quarters in the winner's wing, a space that was significantly nicer than the holding cells and came with actual furniture and a window overlooking the arena floor, her personal comm device was lighting up with messages from across known space. News outlets wanting interviews, sponsors wanting to attach their brands to the human who'd beaten the odds, other humans wanting to know how they could sign up to compete. And one message from Velcrim himself, short and to the point. "Round 2 is in 7 standard days. The predators will be worse. Your odds of survival are now estimated at 12%. I suggest you use the time wisely." Reyna read the message, looked out at the arena floor where maintenance crews were cleaning up the considerable mess she'd made, and smiled. 12%, she said to the empty room. "That's a hell of a lot better than 3 minutes. I'll take it." Somewhere in the galaxy, the arena master who'd said no human survives, Round 1 was recalculating his assumptions about humans, survival, and the relationship between historical data and the specific, individual, absolutely terrifying human who just turned his arena into her personal demonstration of why Earth's most dangerous predator was the one with the opposable thumbs and the refusal to quit.